welcome to another episode of What's Going On with Shaun, a variety podcast grounded in marketing, but with an appetite for quality conversations about things that make life worth living. Time is precious, so thanks for tuning in today as we find out what's going on with
Ray Myers. Welcome back to What's Going On with Shaun. Well, I've got a treat for you guys today that, yes, of course, most of these people that come on to the What's Going On with Shaun episodes are friends, people that I have worked with, people that I admire, people that I have a lot of respect for and enjoy the conversation with. And, well, today is just a lot more of that. I want you guys to know that one of the things that we're going to talk about in depth is really, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you are embarking on that, or if you've been in that for a long period of time, we're going to get into some things with Ray around what owners and entrepreneurs often believe about their own work, about their own lives. We're going to talk about, and Ray's going to share a lot about actionable steps to identify your core values. Maybe you have them, maybe you don't, maybe you think they're cliche, maybe you think, you know what, these things are nonsense, but they're not. And Ray's going to, I know, share a lot of depth around why they're important, how to align them with both the personal and professional side of your life and the goals that you set for yourself. And he's also going to share about strategies creating sustainable systems in business and in your life that will allow you to grow and do it while enjoying all of the moments that we have on the planet. He's also going to share some things that I think will inspire you to prioritize the things in your life that will help you keep away from self-sabotage. And doesn't that sound pretty delightful? Ray is absolutely a multifaceted professional. My time with Ray goes way back. I don't know how many years it is, Ray, you probably remember, but it goes back into part of the years that I spent at Reynolds & Reynolds, which was, 7 years or so, but most of those before I met Ray. And I'll share a little bit about that as I tell you about his background. He and expert in so many different areas around technology. He's an entrepreneur and he is clearly a natural born leader. He's got over 20 years of experience across various industries. He's consistently demonstrated ability to grow business, foster innovation, guide leadership teams to success. And let me just share a little bit about his professional journey. This is where always the guests, sorry, Ray, you have to suffer through this, where I get to just blow you up a little bit. But currently, professional EOS implementer. He specializes in coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, and we're going to get into that and we're going to dig deep on that so that this episode gives you a lot of insight for just the cost of maybe 60 minutes of your time. So we also need to point out that he is a owner at Dr. Logic, presently founder of Dr. Logic, a company that's dedicated to enhancing patient acquisition for doctors and dentists through innovative online marketing solutions. He's also an owner currently with Strategy Search Ventures, manages private investments, and provides consulting for technology companies and specialized vertical markets. He's a board member with RA's Studios. I hope I got that pronunciation proper.
Yeah, Reese, but close enough.
He's an actor and a producer, freelance, and you should know about that. I'm also going to ask him a little bit later about risky business. Just put a pin in that. So he's engaged in independent film projects as a producer, as an actor, showcasing creative and executive production skills. And I will just add here, not something that he puts in here, but it's not a normal thing for a person who is as gifted as a leader and entrepreneur, especially with the technology prowess that he possesses, to also be such a creative artist. I'm fascinated by that. I'm impressed by that. And I think you will be too as you get to know Ray through the episode. Property owner, the Tulamar Bungalows and Villas. Those are where he oversees luxury residential resort in Costa Rica, consistently rated as one of the top accommodations in Central America. You might want to make a note of that for upcoming vacations, perhaps later this year. He's been a CTO and a senior leader in multiple roles, from ClickMotive, and even before that in the Third Coast Media days, Dealer Track, Reynolds & Reynolds, which is how far you have to go back in Ray's career to find where he and I have an intersection. And he's also a musician and performer, which of course makes probably him even more near and dear to my heart because I'm a musician and a performer. I love that. His unique combination of technical expertise, his entrepreneurial spirit and creative expression really makes him the kind of thought leader that's capable of delivering transformative insights to business leaders, entrepreneurs, which he's been doing for, as I mentioned, decades. His track record exemplifies his commitment to innovation, growth, and helping others achieve their full potential. And that's why you want to be tuned into this episode. Ray, welcome to What's Going On with Shaun.
Shaun, man, after all of that, I hope I live up to it. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, you're thinking, who is this guy? I want to meet him, right? Well, listen, I want to start at the kind of the bigger picture of things and what inspired you to believe that things are better than they seem.
It's kind of funny. I have this conversation with a lot of people, and sometimes I even meet strangers, and they say, "Oh, the world is worse today than it's ever been. There's violence, and there's gangs, and there's drugs, and there's an old saying that there's nothing that gives much more credit to the concept of the good old days than just a plain old bad memory. People don't remember what it was like. I mean, we get to live here on Earth, 60 to 100 years, and that's nothing in the blink of the human experience. If you start to think, hey, things are bad right now. I had somebody a few days ago, they said, we have never been more polarized and divided as a country. And I said, Civil War? We're kind of polarized and divided around that when we actually went to bloodshed over it. But if you just watch the nightly news every night, they're going to highlight the very worst things, and they're going to make you think that it's all bad, because you never see a newscast that says 115,000 planes landed safely today. 200 million schools did not have a school shooter in them. It's a beautiful surprise. We have still so much work to be done, and I don't want to be misunderstood as a Pollyanna or an optimist of that sort. But if you just compare, life in the 1950s, it's like, women couldn't own property. That's easy enough. You go back 20 more years, people died of polio. It's like, we've cured that. We've fixed so many things. There's still so much work to be done, but give ourselves a break as a human race every now and then and celebrate some of the accomplishments that we've made.
I think that's really important, and I think it speaks to perspective. There are a few people, I'm not going to give their cliche lines on here because people will probably know who I'm talking about, but I'm just going to say that when you talk about things are actually better than they seem, I really think that is grounded in perspective. And I think it's really important for people, instead of finding yet another thing to bicker about, are you being too optimistic? Are you a pessimist? I think that the world actually does turn really dark if there is no optimism, because hope and optimism are actually very powerful fuel that some people are able to manifest even when times are challenging. But just if times
Absolutely.
are challenging doesn't mean that things are not better than they seem. So I really like that. I think that's really important. It's a really great way to start off this conversation. I think it lets people know a lot about who you really are and what the way you see the world. How do you define living the fullest life? What does that look like for you, even personally?
It's funny. I'm going to rip off a little bit of EOS, mainly because it's become such an integral part of my life. And the very first time that I had somebody read to me the 5 principles of the EOS life, I'm not kidding, I nearly cried. First of all, the person doing it, Curtis Rippey, my mentor, Superman, and he's a very passionate deliverer. I'm going to try to do him justice here. You have to have 5 things in balance. You have to be doing what you love, because we work 40 plus hours a week in some kind of a workplace. And it breaks my heart whenever people go to jobs that they can't say, no, I love doing this. Number 2 is you need to do it with people that you love. You're spending so much time with these people. If you find that you're in a place and not surrounded by wonderful people who pump you up, it's like you're missing something. And I'm not saying it's easy to change. It's not. Getting all 5 of these in balance takes an awful lot of work. So doing what you love with people you love, making a huge difference. And a lot of employers don't understand this one. If you can share with the people that are working for you the difference that they're making, they're so much more motivated to continue to do it. It's not just about a paycheck. It's about feeling like you contribute something, like you've got something to add. And at the end of the day, you can say, here's what I did. Here's why it's important. The 4th one is being compensated appropriately. because you could get all four of those and do it all for free. Now, if you think free is appropriate because you're a good volunteer, that's fantastic. You're compensated appropriately. But if you're paid less than you deserve for the value that you create, then take a hard look at the choices and look around. Job skills are very portable these days, and it is, there's so many opportunities regardless of your skill level, regardless of your education level. So that's the four. The fifth one's probably the trickiest, but it's one that I try to take very seriously. Having time for other passions. Because if you get all four of those first ones, you've got a perfect career life. And it's rare and it's hard to do. But having time for other passions means you get to spend time with your family. You get to spend time with your hobbies. You get to spend time making music. You get to spend time doing things that aren't work. And if you are sacrificing those other passions for the other four, it's not the balance that you're looking like. You got to have all five of them strong. And I remember whenever Curtis read these out loud to me, I thought, I've been there a couple of times in my life. I want to get back. and I'm closer now than I've been in a while. It's a very tough balance to strike, but if you get it and you can make it work, then every day of your life is rewarding and you look forward to it.
I think a lot of people will appreciate that encouragement and the breakdown of the steps, because I know for even in my own life, I think most of it, you feel like you get on one hamster wheel or another and then you're on it, And for a lot of people, they think, well, maybe I might change hamster wheels, but oftentimes there isn't enough investment. You haven't built up enough equity so that you could take a break in between hamster wheels and enjoy those things. It's literally you're on some form of hamster wheel until retirement or until you just are done.
Yeah.
And all the things that you're sharing there, it makes me think you should be enjoying your life before you get to the point, even when you're like, I'm going to retire. Like, okay, you're going to go collect seashells in Florida or something. And that's like that you worked your whole life to get to the point where you're just going to go collect seashells.
Yeah.
While there's nothing wrong with that. I love the way that you're breaking that down, because you should be prioritizing on living that full life all the time.
Yeah. And I think regardless of how busy you are, everybody's got the time to take 20 minutes out a week and spend it alone with your thoughts. Religious people will use prayer, people will use meditation, people will use mindfulness, but lots of times I will just sit in front of those five things and go, which one's the weakest right now? Where do I need to be working?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great encouragement. I want to steer you into some of these myths of entrepreneurship. You have so much experience in this area. I'm curious, why do you think that there are so many entrepreneurs that will convince themselves of what I know you would consider they're lying to themselves? Like, I'm the only one that can do this, or the business owns me. It's going to go out of business if I take 2 weeks off, that type of thing. Why do you think that entrepreneurs end up in that situation? Why do they convince themselves?
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs they're visionary. They can see things that other people can't. And that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The good thing is they can see the possibilities that a lot of other people would have a tendency to miss. That's the good thing. The bad thing is they can see something that's not there and it's really not. In other words, they can go completely delusional. They can live inside their own echo chamber. Apple, with Steve Jobs, called it a reality distortion field. There are lots of different names for it, but visionaries are the engine that create jobs and opportunities in our economy. They're the people who go out and take a risk. They put their savings on the line. They take out a mortgage and they build a business. And they think, oh, this is going to be great. I get to be my own boss. I get to make a lot of money. I get to choose, when I work and when I don't work. And the trouble is lots of visionaries, not all of them, but lots of visionaries are great idea people, but they don't have sound business skills. And, great artists, great doctors, great painters, and great visionaries of all types. It's like they've got the gumption to go out and start a business. Why? Because they believe that they can. I think it was Steve Jobs again who said only people crazy enough to think they can change the world ever will. And that's absolutely true. The problem occurs when they become too wrapped up in it. And I've been there before. I was talking to a young entrepreneur one time, and I said, the great thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to choose which 23 hours of the day you work. And at that time, it felt kind of true. The job owned me. The ability to recognize, I had an investor once who told me, he said, there's a list of things, Ray, that truly you and only you can do. And if that's true, and those take up a certain chunk of time during the day and the week, then by definition, anything that somebody else can do, somebody else must do, or you're doing a disservice to yourself, you're doing a disservice to your customers, you're doing a disservice to your shareholders if you have those. And that really struck home with me. And it's like, oh, okay. And not only that, you're doing a disservice to the people around you who want to help, who want to have their careers developed. And it's normal because you think you're running 1,000 miles an hour, and maybe you are, but and so whenever task A drops onto your desk, you go, yeah, okay, I can do it, or I can spend 3 times as long teaching somebody else how to do it. Well, if you're going to do it more than 4 times, spend the 3 times as long. Every single week, something should be coming off of your plate, something that you either hate to do and you're not good at, or something that you love to do and you're not good at, or something that you don't love but you happen to be good at. That's kind of the quadrant of personal hell. It's like, hey, I'm good at this, but I hate it. Yeah. Can you elevate and delegate to the point where you spend the vast majority and maybe eventually all of your time doing things that you're really good at and that you really love to do? And it sounds easy on paper. The practice to get from, where you are drowning in your own tasks to that, elevate and delegate kind of a lifestyle takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of self-awareness. And, I was talking about, take a break every so often and listen. That's another really good exercise. What am I doing that somebody else should do? And you can't think of that while you're in the heat of the moment. You have to step away, take a clarity break, step away for a few minutes with just you and some paper, no electronics, no interruptions. And it's amazing the thoughts that'll come to you. You need a couple of little, seeds to plant. Am I living my fullest life? Am I elevating and delegating to my unique ability? And that makes the time a whole lot more productive. Otherwise, you sit around in Starbucks and watch the people, and that's not as productive. So,
I think it's so important. I mean, you gave a lot of great little practical advice and tips in there for people that might be stuck with that type of mindset. And I think it's important because if you think about an entrepreneur or a business owner, or really just even those that are not entrepreneurs and business owners that get into that type of thinking, I'm the only one that can do this. I'm the leader of the department. I'm the team lead. There are a lot of people that can find themselves believing these lies and then not have any tools, advice, tips, strategies to work themselves out of it. So all they end up with is the negative impact of these things on both their business and personal lives. So I love that you kind of stepped through just naturally a lot of different tips and points of advice that can help people. Before I move on, because I've got these little sections I'm taking you through, is there anything else there that you would maybe think is a real strong point of encouragement for people in that mindset that would break them out?
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about, because I'm kind of talking to the entrepreneurs in the audience, but you're absolutely right. This applies to everyone. This applies to everybody at every skill level. Even back when, before I was owning businesses, I worked for the man in a few companies. I've had some managerial responsibilities, and I've always told people, it's like your job is to work yourself out of a job. And my job is to ensure that you never succeed at it. And what those people who took that advice on faith and did was they got promoted, and they got promoted again, and they developed skills they didn't know that they had. And honestly, that's got to be one of the most rewarding things about being a business owner, is seeing the legacy of all the people I've had the privilege of working with who now have their own, you're one of them, have their own businesses, who have, they've taken that entrepreneurial spark. Maybe I was a little contributor to it along the way, and turned it into something beautiful. I've spent a lot of time just over the last 6 months reconnecting with people who were important to me. You're one of them. that I've, neglected and haven't had the time to talk to in a long time because I've been too busy and wound up. But no, that's extremely rewarding, and I think it's good advice in general. The caveat I'll throw into that is you got to have the right kind of boss. And have a boss who understands that, who's willing to go to bat for you, to promote you. And there are far too many people out there that are not great bosses or don't have great bosses. That goes back to people you love.
Yeah, that's. I have worked for I've worked for some really great bosses, and I've worked for some terrible bosses, and I've had some really great. I have some really great clients. Actually, all of my clients are really great right now because I get to choose them all. But I've also worked with people that are very difficult, and I couldn't imagine actually working in their company and being under their leadership because all of these things are broken. And I can't help but think that the absence of these people having the right mindset, having tools, having mentors like you, I'm the beneficiary of, and I think everyone could think of themselves in this manner, but the good and the bad in terms of people's strengths and weaknesses as leaders, as bosses, as people who have kind of shown you the way or how you should do things. Obviously, if you've worked for a handful of different companies and people in your lifetime, and if you're really young and you haven't, and you're listening to this, you will. And all of these people are going to have some measure of impact, influence, impression on you. And it's still yet up to the individual to take the things that you do now in teaching businesses and individuals, leadership teams, to have a tool set, if you will, for lack of a better, metaphor, to take all of the good and the bad and combine that into how you make it the very best that it can be. And just this conversation alone reminds me of just a handful of years ago. It was pre-pandemic. I remember picking up, it was a collection of leadership stories from Harvard Business Review in a book in the airport. And I remember the first one was from one of the professors there who basically shared a story of two different sides of the coin. A young woman who works for a boss who is a tyrant, doesn't appreciate her. There's never any recognition of the hard work that's being done. There's always you're going home at the end of every single day feeling like you didn't do enough, that you're not significant, like you could do better. And in that example, that type of leadership sends somebody home that they need. They rely on that person, but they send them home with that toxicity. And that person goes back to a family, even if they're just still not a family, they still go back to wherever they are in their moment alone, processing all of that, versus then he gives the other side of that, basically saying that the kind of people that you work with, Ray, have maybe arguably the most important jobs in the world because of the amount of effect they have on people. In that same instance, a great leader who says, I want to make sure that you're publicly praised and you're recognized, and I appreciate you so much, because some people, they are making enough money, but they're not appreciated. And so just the fact that there's no recognition and appreciation or respect for what they do, you could lose them, even when they feel well compensated. But the second side of that is, imagine that young woman goes home feeling so appreciated, so recognized. We couldn't be as good as we are without you. And then she takes that back. And let's just say she is married and she has children, and that whole family gets to bask in the glow, if you will, of the light that is coming from great leadership all the way in through their people into their lives. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about what you're talking about and what you're doing so much of, which is helping people, yes, in your professional and your business life, but very much also in your personal life.
So there's
Because
something
it's
I
very
don't
hard to remove
understand.
the two things from each other. They always cross over. So yeah, very, very interesting. Anyway, enough about my thoughts on this. You're just sparking some energy here.
Well,
And so
you made me think of something when you were talking about that.
oh yeah.
I have never understood why companies don't treat their employees better. You might say it's like, oh, okay, we can't afford to. It costs absolutely nothing to praise and to recognize people, and even to compensate them fairly, because it's what you were saying. It's like, these are good people. They're going to leave. I've run technology companies for a couple of decades right now, and I say, our product isn't the software that we offer or the service that's around it. It's the next great idea that somebody on this team comes up with. And if I get, tight and chinchy on maintaining the comfort and the quality of life for the people who are working there. It's like an ice cream company getting stingy with the refrigeration. It's like you're running the risk of spoiling your product. And I've had a lot of people through the years who said, it's like, Ray, you're so nice. It's like, you recognize people, you make them feel important. It's like, why do you do that? And it's like, why wouldn't I, first of all? But second of all, I like being a nice person, but that's not why I do it. It's like I do it because it's the right thing for me, for them, and for the company. And I'm able to get, hopefully, most of the time, my egos and insecurities out of the way, and make sure that the people have the kind of recognition that they deserve. And again, it's not altruism. It's not a gift. It is rational self-interest. It's like I want the people around me to be successful because that makes me more successful. It makes me more happy. And, hopefully that's not terribly selfish. It comes across as selfless and altruistic, but trust me, it's not. We win together, or we lose together, and we find a way to win together later.
Yeah, well, from personal experience, I can tell you that you are in a league of your own in terms of a C-suite, especially on the tech side, of being a very high level of emotional intelligence, of recognizing that in an organization. And I didn't even work in the tech side of the business that we were in together, but I certainly can contrast you and all of my knowledge and in time working with you against others, and you are absolutely in the single digits for certain. And I love this topic actually on recognition, and that is something that you think is important. And why do companies not treat their employees better? Before you and I met, but also through Reynolds and Reynolds, I tell people all the time that, especially people that are like, oh, Reynolds. I'm like, Reynolds was actually so great for me because they had a lot of management training and sales training and, going through DISC and personality profiling and all. I learned so much when I was there because they did have very extensive training for people. And if you were at particular levels where they really felt like you were going to be somebody that they needed in key roles in the organization, you got even more of that training. And I'll never forget, I think it was the first NADA, which is about to come up for the automotive industry, that I ever went to, talking about recognition. During that NADA, I was awarded 2 rising star awards or superstar awards, which was somebody from leadership at Reynolds saw you do something that everyone needed to know about. And Reynolds, they probably still do this, but they had kind of the rally before you're starting the day at the booth, and then they have everybody gets together at the end of the day, and you kind of war room. And I think there was some sort of monetary prize, $25 or $75. I don't remember the dollars. What I remember is it put me on the map with a whole lot of people at Reynolds because I did things that it was just doing what I loved doing. And I remember the 2 things that got those things, but I wasn't doing it for that reason. But the fact that I was recognized went so far. It put so much gas in my tank. It made me so excited, and I appreciated that. And Reynolds, what did they get? They got the benefit of everything that I could bring to them, the highest level of my capabilities, just for recognizing me for doing the things that I love doing. So love this. I could talk about this type of stuff all day long, Ray. Let's talk about practical strategies. Why is it so important to first solve people problems before going on to address challenges?
Oh, that one's near and dear to my heart. Has been for a long, long time. Toxic people inside any culture, regardless of how much skill they bring to the table, are doing more harm than good. And there are too many managers, directors, people out there who say, well, this person's a cancer, he's toxic, but he's our top salesperson, he's our top performer, he's our lead architect in software development. And you can't just take one or the other. You have to have right people who share your values, the important values, not the ones that are on the cafeteria wall, but the ones that actually define the culture and what it means to be a good employee at a location, as well as the ability to do their jobs very well. And way too many companies make 2 different mistakes. One is they'll forgive bad behavior because of good performance, and that just sends a signal to the rest of the organization that you can get away with that kind of behavior if you want to. And then the other one is the person that you just absolutely love Maybe they're even a family member. They're your buddy from college, but they're not good at their job. If you're a for-profit corporation, you either need to help them find a different job within that organization, or treat them with the respect of trying to help them get better, trying to help them correct and improve. And if that doesn't work, finding another job for them somewhere else. They'll come back and thank you eventually. I've had two or three different, since I've worked in technology, that my classic story is always, the asshole architect, really brilliant, but really arrogant. And I have had a handful, and you just absolutely can't tolerate them. I had an interview years and years ago, and it was for a senior architect position in technology, and the entire tech team loved this guy. So did I. He was amazing. He was so smart. And around us, he didn't seem arrogant. But I always make a point before I hire anyone, I will take them out to lunch with some non-tech team members that would be peers to them, people that interface with, people that would work with. And this particular young man talked down to my director of support through the entire meal. And I was not a very popular person whenever I said, no, you can't hire him. If he's going to talk down to people like that, he doesn't fit our culture. It's like we are confident, but we're not arrogant about it. We know our stuff, but we don't have to make other people feel inferior because of that. And no, it wasn't a popular decision, but it was the right decision.
Yeah, those can be really difficult too. And I love that you mentioned that. And I think that's something that I'll just take another moment to encourage people. Make sure that you reach out to Ray. I'll say this at the end of the episode as well. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can find him there, Ray Myers on LinkedIn. We'll give you all that detailed stuff here later in the episode. But really important, if you are getting a lot out of this episode already, that you think about, well, what's going on in your own world? Could this be useful in your business? Are you an entrepreneur, a business owner? Are you in the C-suite and you're like, you know what? I thought I could do it all on my own and I haven't really needed to reach out. I didn't realize that there's actually practical help from people who are normal and not crazy and not super arrogant. Just in this last question, Ray, it just makes me think about there are a lot of people that don't understand how to separate those personal versus professional decisions. And I say that as if it's an easy thing. It's not an easy thing, but when you do at least separate the fact that those two categories are important, it does make it easier to say, okay, Ray, teach me how to approach somebody and talk about the things of like, I love you. You're awesome. That'll never change. You're not perfect in this role. And so I want to find a different role, right? Or if I can't find that role, this isn't the personal side because personally I love you, but professionally, I might not be able to keep you in this seat. That requires training. That requires a lot of steps to understand how to do that in a way that doesn't cause all kinds of division and catastrophic consequence on that personal and professional side of your life. So again, just digging into some really, really, really great stuff here. I want to ask, how do you think businesses can avoid these pitfalls of broken processes and org charts that just are really ineffective? Because I've suffered through some of that.
I'm going to take those as two different questions. Let's talk about processes first.
Okay.
There are two kinds of problems that small businesses have. Startup businesses, 10 and up employees. Because when you're smaller than 10, everybody can do everything. You're doing blocking and tackling. But if you don't find a way to grow out of that, you're never going to be able to scale. So I guess maybe these two questions are more related than I originally thought. But I'm just going to stick on the process chain here for just a second. The two problems that I see over and over again is either the company has no processes. It's all tribal knowledge. It's all go ask Ray. He knows the answer. That's devastating. Or you got some kind of a process champion with multiple MBAs who's going to create you a 700-page standard operations procedures manual that nobody's going to read and nobody's going to take the time to follow because we're entrepreneurs. Anybody can be lazy and not have a process. Anybody can be over the top and over document. There's a very thin line in between there for being able to figure out what are the very most important things that this business has to do. What are the ones where we put in 20% of the effort to get 80% of the results? What are the things that if we consistently get them right every single time, and it's little stuff, then we're going to dazzle our customers. We're going to be able to train people a lot more quickly. So first you have to identify what that handful of processes are. And I always Start with hiring. This is where it begins. We need a rock solid hiring process. And I need to ensure, even when I've only got 10 employees, eventually I'm going to have 200. And I want to make sure that every hiring manager hires using that same quality set of standards. If you don't dictate it, if you don't simplify it, document it, ensure that it's followed by everybody, then you're going to end up with 20 different hiring processes inside your company. And that order is important. It's like, figure out which ones, and then can you simplify it? Can you get it down to 2 pages? 2 pages. If you look at things like the pre-surgery checklist, what do surgeons do? Their checklist says things like wash your hands because it's easy to forget. But if you do forget, you cause infection. Put on a mask. Yeah, that's another one. Confirm what it is that you're doing. Don't operate on memory or hearsay. And it's a short list. And it's easy for somebody to help a doctor check off all of the items. You know what's not on that list? Doing the surgery. I'm going to assume you're a surgeon, that you know how to do surgery. And that's part of the way that people overcomplicate processes. Processes shouldn't tell you how to do your job. They should tell you what is necessary to get your job done well. You should know how to do your job. Process and training are 2 different things. So the ability to simplify it to the point that anybody can follow a simple checklist and get the bulk of the results out of it. I'm going to botch a quote. It's one of my favorites that I've been trying to memorize, but it's something along the lines of, automate the inevitable so you can humanize the exceptional. It's like, make it really easy to do for everybody to react to the things that you know are going to happen over and over again. That way they can rise and bring their unique human talents and their charms to the time whenever, okay, this situation, the rules don't apply. And then the other question you asked about was accountability. And, most businesses out there have an org chart. And the main thing and whenever an employee looks at that org chart, the main thing they're thinking about is ego. It's like, I want to move up in the ranks. I want to have a more impressive title. I want to go from manager to director to whatever. And it's like, that's great if you're, looking to pad people's egos. It's a little bit different if what you want to do is communicate, what do you do? What are you responsible for? And to whom are you responsible for it? And EOS calls that an accountability chart. They want to make sure that you understand it looks a little bit like an org chart, but it's really different because org charts have titles on them, but they don't say what you do. And just looking at any given org chart, you might say, okay, well, who's ultimately responsible for, the overall quality of action X of this particular thing? And you're not going to know because all it is a bunch of titles, and the titles don't really mean a whole lot. So I'm a big fan of the EOS accountability chart because it starts by defining the functions that you need to run the business well, and then putting a handful of roles on each of those functions, not 30 things, not a resume, but 5 or 6. And I've got a smart camera that likes to follow me around sometimes. Fortunately, I've also got the control right there, so I can tell him to stop doing that.
One of
he
those
watches
fancy
my hands.
cameras, huh?
Yeah, no, he thinks he's smart, but there we go. Anyway, I'll try not to wave my hands as much. With an accountability chart, one of the rules is one and only one person's responsible for any given critical role. Why? Because if more than one person's responsible, then no one's responsible. If you and I say we're going to share the responsibility and it doesn't happen, which one of us is to blame? It's like, you need to be able to simplify it down, dumb it down so that anybody can look at this and go, I have this question. This is the person that I go talk to. That's going to map to those processes too. It's like, who's ultimately responsible for hiring quality? I need one and only one person, but that person works with all of the hiring managers to make sure that they understand the process, and keep it simple. Don't make it complicated because you're a small business. You're not a giant Fortune 100. Take advantage of the fact that you're small and make it simple, make it easy to work with.
Yeah. I think the next question I have maybe segues pretty good. What does it mean to you for a business, let's just say, to be flying blind? And how could the owners recognize this in their own operations?
I can't remember. Did I send you my joke about that, or I'll tell it for the benefit of the audience here, because I love this one. And the reason that I love it is every entrepreneur in the audience, every business founder will go, "Oh, that's been me at one point or another." So the story goes like this: the pilot comes out of the cockpit and says to the passengers, "I've got bad news and I've got good news. The bad news is everything in the cockpit is smashed. We have no idea what our altitude is, which way we're going, how much fuel we have left. The good news is we're making damn good time." And way too many entrepreneurs, it's like they mistake that sense of motion for a sense of progress without having any kind of a clue what's actually running their business. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I say, what is it that you measure in order to determine that you're successful? And they say, well, I look at P&L, I look at revenue, I look at growth over time. And it's like, well, those are all trailing indicators. It's like, it's great if they're good. What do you do if they're bad? It's like, how do you see around corners and know that know what's coming before it impacts your bottom line, before it impacts your P&L? And so when I really encourage people, I say less is more until I'm blue in the face. And it took me a while to really recognize and appreciate what that means. It's not a cliche. If you can simplify it down to less, and you've got the right items on that shorter list, then it is more, because it's fewer data points to consider. It's fewer things to get confused. We're increasing the signal to the noise ratio. And I like say 5 to 15. If you're going to move to a desert island with really bad cell service, and the only way that you're going to find out if your business is successful or not is that a cabana boy brings you a little piece of paper once a day or once a week with a handful of numbers. What should those numbers be? And if you apply that kind of an acidic test to it, then you'll come up with the right kinds of things that you need to measure. And then you need to have one and only one person responsible for each of those numbers. And it needs to be reported to you on a pulse, probably every 7 days, unless it's one of those things that just happens once a month. By the time you're dealing with something that happens once a quarter, once again, 90 days have gone by, and it's too late to fix the problem. So I'm very big fan on everybody in the organization has a number. Everybody knows what their number is and what that goal is. And again, that takes it back to they have a sense of purpose. It's like, I know I'm the person who has to hit this number every single week. And if I don't, I know I'm going to be held accountable for it. I'm going to watch and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that we hit the number I'm responsible for. And I've got a lot of trust in the team around me, because I know all of them have numbers too. And all of them feel exactly the same way. That's how you create incremental success. I'm a big fan of get rich slow schemes. Get rich fast schemes tend to blow up in your face. But if you can keep what you make and increment a little bit on it every single day, then eventually you end up with a big pile of really good stuff. And it sounds easy to say. It's actually not that hard to do, because if it's important, then you measure it. And if it fails to meet the measurement, then you've got time to react to it. It literally does give you the ability to see the future in a way that a lot of business owners can't.
You just shared a whole lot of ingredients for people to learn how to land the plane safely, right? And actually go on the subsequent flights. Continue to keep on flying that plane.
I love good landings.
Yes, don't we all? This next section is actually really around kind of building a better life. Got a few questions on this. Can't wait to get your perspectives and answers. What role do clarity and intentionality play in your mind in creating the ideal life?
We've talked a little bit about clarity already. I'll loop back on it because we just kind of glanced at it. And a lot of people don't understand the advantage of a little bit of quiet time. We live in a noisy world. We live in a world where it feels like everything's clamoring for your attention. It's like, turn off the endless scroll on Instagram and Facebook for a few minutes. It's just not that important. And spend a little bit of time alone with the really important thoughts. That's where the intentionality comes in. You got to know what you're going to do when you're seeking this clarity. if you just let your mind wander, maybe you'll stumble onto something good. I read a great book about a year ago called The Artist, recommended to a friend of mine. It was a lot of clarity break around being more creative, how to write music and how to create compositions and poetry. And it's exactly the same stuff as being a good, inspired business leader. A little bit of trust, a little faith, a little time alone, and making sure that you focus on the right things, that you practice on the right things, develop the right disciplines. If you're not intentional about that, if you don't have a plan for at least the direction you're going, because I get people all the time, they say, oh, okay, I want to create the 10-year plan and a 3-year plan. And it's like, create a 1-year plan, create a 3-year image in your mind, create a 10-year target that you can shoot at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had a friend of mine recently, he said, the plan is the vision of an Italian vacation. I'm sorry, the picture is the vision of the Italian vacation, and the plan is the tickets and the itinerary. Mm. And you have to have one before you can get to the other. I've always been a fan. I told my kids the same thing. It's like your goals should be directional. They shouldn't have an end point. Whenever I used to be pretty bad shape 15 years ago, about 30 pounds overweight, and couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without getting out of breath. And so I hired a dietitian and I started working out in the gym and made a difference really quick. I got in shape, and a lot of people would stop and they'd ask me and they'd say, "Well, you're in good shape now. What are your fitness goals?" And I said, "My goal is to show up in the gym 3 days a week and eat a healthy diet." Because if you set a goal to say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds or I'm going to add an inch to my biceps or whatever like that, when you get there, then what do you do? And it's like, my goal is to be intentional, to create a healthy habit that I can live for the rest of my life. I don't like fad diets for that reason. It's like, eat a sensible, healthy diet every day, get the right amount of sleep, get the right amount of exercise. And you might say, oh, I don't have the time. My life is too busy. That's kind of like the Stone Age cavemen telling the wheel salesman they're too busy to listen to a sales pitch, It's not that hard, but you do have to be intentional about it.
It is so true. It is so true. Last year was much more intentional in a lot of ways in my life, and it made a significant improvement in a lot of different areas of my life. And I like that. And I like that you encourage people to take deliberately. If you want clarity, you're going to need to get comfortable with some solitude, shut off all the noise. And people that really know me, I think they don't believe when I tell them this, but it's absolutely true. A lot of my favorite moments, or really definitely when my gas tank gets filled back up, it's when I'm alone. I am extroverted and I don't even know what brevity means, but
we're like that way.
I really, if I don't get that intentional time all by myself, like just let me go walk in the woods. Let me go. I need to be away from people. I love people. That's the way I was wired, but they also exhaust me and challenge me on a daily basis. And how do I fix that? How do I calibrate back to where I am as useful as I possibly can be? Because that's what I want to be. I want to be living optimally. It's definitely by solitude, by myself, shut it all off. And I think that I would, I need to encourage more people to get comfortable with that in 2025. Could just shut it all off. Like it's okay.
I'll take it a step further. This is the intentionality in it. It's like plan for it, put it on the calendar, and make it non-negotiable.
Yes.
Thursdays at 4:30, and somebody says, "What are you doing Thursday at 4:30?" I'm busy. What are you doing? None of your business. I'm doing something very, very important, and I'm very intentional about it.
Yeah. Several years ago, this will, for people that don't know this about me, there was a song. It's faith-based, Christian-based song called "Take Heart," and it's a pretty long song, but the lyrics are very, very powerful if you have that particular religious belief, which I do. And it is a song that I still go to when I just need just this realistic perspective, encouragement, and it is in the dark. Turn off all the lights. All I want to do is listen. I want complete and utter darkness, and I just want the music to allow the lyrics to go to a place that they can't go by themselves, just reading them off the page. And for you or anybody else, it could be a different song. It could be a different art form. It could be a different, but that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Put it on the calendar, be intentional about it. And if you find something that's that rejuvenating, really calibrates you to your best, then keep that specific thing there until it no longer serves that purpose, and find something else. I love this. I think there's just so much great content in this episode, Ray. It's fantastic. Moving along, this is another thing that I think we just actually talked about it a little bit, but before we get to it, I want to ask you a little bit about core values. A lot of people get a little skeptical, or they have kind of mushy feelings about core values. You and I, in previous conversations over the last few weeks, have talked about core values and know that they are important, they are meaningful, but how would you encourage someone to identify their core values and align them with both their work and personal relationships?
I think it's really, people have used core values to the point that it's cliche. And if I'm talking about a company's core values or my core values, and people are rolling their eyes, those are not your core values. A classic that I get is working with a leadership team, and they say, one of our core values is that we're all hardworking, but everybody knows the boss isn't. And if you try to go to an employee group and say hardworking is one of our core values, and you've got a lazy member of the leadership team, it's not going to stick. Core values have to be something that comes, they're not written. They are not contrived. They are not made up. They have to be discovered. You have to be honest with yourself and say, what is it that really drives me? Not what do I want to be? Not what have I been at some point in the past? And you can't pat yourself on the back for having core values that everybody has. I was talking to a friend of mine who was working with developing core values for his church. And I said, well, tell me about your core values. He said, well, we got 10 big ones. I assume he was talking about the 10 commandments. And I said, I don't think that applies in this case. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, thou shalt not kill is against U.S. law. It's like, you can't call that a core value because everybody's required to have it. I said, I might go out on a limb and say that thou shalt not covet is impossible to attain. And so you can't really use that either. He says, you're right. He says, I want to go back and talk to the leadership team. What advice would you give? And I said, come up with what is it that makes you as a community unique? What is it that is something that everybody there really lives? It's not what we're trying to do. It's not what we used to do. It's not something we're required to do. And your personal core values have to do that as well. And so you've got to lean into who you really are. And my personal core value, number one, is operate on facts. And that's cool and I like it. But at the same time, it's a little bit embarrassing. It's like, if I don't have facts, I have a hard time making decisions. I don't like opinions. I'm one of those fact checker people. And so I recognize, yes, this is a value to me. It's a strength and it's a weakness, but I will always be true to it because it's a part of who I am. I didn't sit down and go, who do I want to be? I asked the question, who am I really? And number two is run towards the danger. Why? We were all evolved to perceive danger and to have a fight or flight response from it. But that was, back whenever we were, living in the caves and fighting off the wild animals. Today, the danger is that fear that you get from speaking in public, or that fear that you have from asking the girl to dance, or that fear that you get from talking to your boss about what you really want out of your career. Anytime you feel that, it should create a warning signal in your mind. Ignore that danger. This is not something that's going to kill me. And I won't go in depth into the rest of my core values, but those are a couple of my very favorites. I'll throw in one more. And that's fly your freak flag high. Feel free to be different. Feel free to do some crazy things. That's me. And I knew that it was important enough to me that I wanted to memorialize it as a value. Now, whenever you go into a corporation or a company or a volunteer organization, if they've got core values that were discovered and not made up, and you have to have that conversation. It's like, all right, are these pretty words on the wall, or does everybody here try to live by them? And if they fail, do we get rid of them?
Mm.
And if the answer is yes, then those are real core values, and you need to make sure they align with yours. And if hardworking is a legitimate one and your guy likes to skirt the corners in order to be able to get things done more efficiently or more easily without as hard of a work, you're probably going to have a values alignment problem there. And if a company doesn't start their interview process with you with, here's the personality of the people that are around here, here's what we expect of you on a behavioral level, if they dive straight into job skills, at least, by a few subsequent interviews, that's got to come up at some point. If it doesn't, you need to bring it up. What are the people like? And what are the behaviors that we cherish and reward? And what are the behaviors that we punish and fire people for? You need to know that in order to know, is this a culture that's going to fit? So as an employee, ask those questions. As an employer, make sure that it's true, because a right set of core values will attract the right kind of people, and it'll repel the wrong kind, and you'll make fewer hiring mistakes.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't, even if people don't personally call them, these are my core values, although I think that's an easy framework, it has so much impact on both what you're talking about from a business perspective and a personal perspective to know what those things are. Fly your freak flag high, right? You're free to be you. If that individualism, however that is manifested in your life, live it out loud. Like, just, you got one life to live. Some people think they're getting more. I don't. I subscribe to, this is the one I get. And so I love that, because for me, I don't actually go around, these are my core values, but I know what my core values are, right? Kindness, right? When I encounter people who, everyone gets challenged, but being kind to people, being merciful, I think is really important. I think having self-control, like discipline around those things, because humans are so emotional and we are not in control of most of the things that happen to flare up our emotions, whether they're great feeling emotions or not so great feeling emotions. If you have no self-control and no discipline around your self-control, those things go really crazy. So I love that you're talking about these things. As we conclude, I've got a couple more serious questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it with some fun questions. I want to turn this back around to a couple of questions around your thoughts around entrepreneurs and helping them. What steps can entrepreneurs be taking to avoid this self-sabotage and focusing on really the things that truly should matter to them?
I think it's extremely important that you have a clear picture of the vision in your mind, and most entrepreneurs do. And they think that's enough. They think that's the easy part. And they might even trick themselves into saying, not only do I have this vision, I've told everybody this vision. But until you've been told something 7 times or more, it may or may not stick.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't delude yourself into thinking that everybody in your organization shares your vision. You need to share it over and over in a highly simplified way, in a way that people can memorize, so that you can be sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction. You need people who are responsible for commanding that row. You watch the galley ships in Gladiator, and there's one person who's yelling row, row, so that we all row at the same time. We're all rowing in the same direction. Lots of visionary entrepreneurs just assume everybody's wired like they are, and they're not. Most people would prefer to have a set of responsibilities that they know they're responsible for, that they know they're being measured for. Good employees want to be measured, and it's just easy to forget that in the chaos of running a business. If you're a true visionary and you love operating at 30,000 feet, and you're the guy who comes to every meeting with 20 great new ideas, then you're probably not that good at leading and managing and holding people accountable, because you're the dreamer, you're the engine, you're the person who's the wind in the sails. You need a counterpart, you need a rudder, you need somebody there that you can trust, that can hold everyone accountable, can develop these kinds of processes. And if you don't have that, you're probably just going to run around in circles, because when real true visionaries are trying to run a business, you get this repeatable pattern. It's a 90-day surge of activity. Everybody, the visionary comes in, they get everybody excited about the great new idea, and everybody is pumped. They understand their role, they understand the vision, and they start moving toward it. And then 90 days later, they get distracted by something shiny. And they say, okay, now we're going this way. And they think they're clever. They think this, oh, we're nimble. We're able to pivot. and that can be very true whenever you're small. But as you start to scale, that's going to do you more of a disservice than a service. It's like, Steve Jobs had his Steve Wozniak and Walt Disney had his Roy Disney. And both of them will tell you, if it weren't for my ability to work hand in hand with this person as an equal contributor, we understand our lanes. It's like, I'm going to be the vision. You're going to be the traction. Vision without traction is hallucination. And way too many entrepreneurs lose track of that. They think, hey, I've got all the vision in the world. But as I said earlier, you can see things that other people can't, but you can also see things that aren't there. You need somebody there to be able to check you. And it needs to be somebody that you can work with. And EOS would call this person an integrator. It doesn't matter what the name is. The important thing is, do you have somebody in your organization who can harmoniously execute all of the functions, who can be the non-emotional tiebreaker? Because visionaries don't like confrontation a lot of times. They don't like making they love making the big decisions, and that's great. It's why we need them. But the little decisions of, should we fire this person? That's not always their strength. Very frequently, it's not. Now, I went off onto a tangent. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just exceptional advice. We're going into a speed round for the audience. Well, this is probably the most fun, although this has been a very information-rich episode. This is the this or that. It's just speed round. Don't overthink any of it. Quick answers. Because you're you can, if you're like, pass, I don't want to answer. It's too hard. You can. But I've got a dozen this or that's before we close it out. Are you ready?
I will do my very best.
Okay. The first three are super easy. The last two, maybe not so easy. Here we go. Hot dog or corn dog?
Hot dog, barely.
Taco or burrito?
Burrito.
Burger or pizza?
Pizza.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, Star Trek, easy. Sorry, Star Wars fans.
Superman or Batman?
Batman.
Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
I like that answer. Test the waters or jump into the deep?
Jump into the deep.
Night owl or early bird?
I'm an early bird.
City life or country life?
City life, easy.
A messy desk or a clean desk?
I like a clean desk, but if you could see my desk, it is very messy, and that's who I am.
Okay, last two. See the future or change the past?
See the future.
Okay. And perhaps the most difficult this or that question. Save 100 strangers or one person that you love.
The utilitarian in me knows I should save the 100 strangers, but I don't know them. And I got to go from the heart and save the person I love.
Yeah. Totally get it. What a fantastic episode this has been. Before I conclude, for the listeners and or viewers that have absolutely enjoyed this episode, where would you like them to be able to connect with you? On LinkedIn, please share all of those places where you would primarily like people to connect with you and find you.
Absolutely. LinkedIn's a great way to do it. And my name is an unusual spelling of Myers. It's Myers. It's kind of cute because I've got kids and it's fun to watch them say, oh, my name is Drew Myers, Myers. They've heard me do it enough times. I also have an EOS website. It's eosworldwide.com/Ray-Myers, Myers. I'm pretty easy to find on Google. There's a handful of other Ray Myerses out there, but I'm one of two in Plano, and I'm not the really good-looking family counselor who lives just north of me named Ray Myers.
We'll try to get those links included for the people that are viewing so that they can see that and find it in the notes of the episode as well. And to the audience, well, now you know what's going on with Ray.